Senior projects are a common occurrence at many universities. They showcase the skills cultivated by students at the end of their four-year path to graduation. While it is an academic milestone for all students, it should be but a single part of their growing portfolio professionally. Students are prompted to use campus resources and labs, to reach out and work with others, and to get continuous feedback in the attempt to come out in the end with a professional-looking product. However, things have been slightly different this year. With the novel coronavirus now a normality, labs are not guaranteed to be open. Outsourcing content is risky in the event that someone gets sick. Room capacity restrictions are very prominent, and you find yourself having most meetings remotely. These are the new guidelines that we must work within while still completing production. While COVID does bring many new obstacles, we aim to show that a worthwhile production is still very possible.
Hi, I'm Tim Hopkins.
And I'm Cameron Hawkins.
And thanks for watching our senior project documentary. We wanted to do our project in this way to show our professors, our fellow students, and ourselves that we could make a decent project even under the circumstances we are. Knowing that and the parameters of this project, we wanted to make sure that we emphasize the impact of COVID-19 and how we're having to work around it and how the school itself is working around it. So to start this project off, we'd like to show you an interview we took with ourselves only a few days into the process. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, Mr. Hawkins.
How you doing, Tim?
We hear you're doing a senior project for USM, and we have a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Shoot, man, I'm here for it.
All right, our first question would be, what resources do you plan to use?
Okay, so a lot of it's going to be some of my own equipment, but for the school resources I plan to use, I'll be heavily using the recording booths in the 306 recording studio that we have on the third floor of College Hall at USM. I'll be using 305 as well if I just need to do some mixing. I've been using their Audio Technicas and for the shotgun mics, and I've been using some of the C-stands. But as far as like the recording devices, those are all mine. I'm using some Focusrite, Claret 4 Pre, along with Logic Pro and Pro Tools. Pro Tools mainly for tracking vocals, Logic for any composition. All right, Tim, so I'm glad we got to get you in here today for a few little questions.
Yeah.
How would you say that your on-call job has affected your ability to do this project?
It is crippling. It's one of the things that if I could choose not to, I would, but you know, bills gotta be paid, you gotta keep food on the table. I got a girlfriend and a dog and other animals to provide for. You know, you gotta make sacrifices, but I've never understood. I've always had pretty decent organizational skills in the sense of I know what's a priority, but I know how to make other things mix. And while this sucks and like I don't get as much sleep as I'd like, or I don't have any free days like I'd like, I understand what it takes to make this work. So even though it sucks, I mean, it's coming, you know, it's working. How do you think COVID will affect this project?
Well, with all the restrictions we have on campus, you can't have a big crew in any room. Labs are not guaranteed to be open ever because if someone gets COVID and they were in the lab within any recent weeks, then they have to close it down for about a week and decontaminate it. But I mean, honestly, just the first thing I said, the room restrictions, that's the biggest one because when you're working on, you know, an interview and stuff like that, it's nice to have people on every piece of equipment, but we can't really do that. So we're having to be very, very meticulous with how we set up things beforehand because once we hit the record button, I mean, there's not really much of anyone there to actually look at the equipment. How do you think COVID has affected your academic career?
I would like to be bitter, you know? Like, I feel in my heart that it kind of ruined the wrap up because things were good. I'd come on campus and see my friends and we'd have classes and, you know, I'm a very hands-on learner. Like, you can tell me something and I'll get it to a degree, but it's something totally different in the sense of like showing me. If you show me and then let me do it, I'll get it and I'll know it forever. And the classes being moved over to online, even though everyone knows they can't work online, so they're making it work online. But it's kind of like you work all this time, you work years and years to get to your final semester, and my senior year was kind of snuffed due to a global pandemic. How do you think that USM has prepared you two for this project?
Well, they've drilled in the basics of all the audio that I'm gonna need, essentially. Like every little bit of like your basics that you could possibly need. There's a lot of redundancy, which is not a bad thing whatsoever, especially in a field where the fundamentals of audio are just so damn essential. I've taken some really good classes. They even had a guy from Estonia named Jose come down. He taught a fantastic mixing and mastering class. Also just given us the ability to use these facilities to record this. And probably one of the biggest things is the way that they have taught us here, even if we don't necessarily know exactly how to go about something, we have the foundational knowledge there so that we can go research, efficiently research the problems that we are having and come up with quick solutions. And what about you, Tim?
As it pertains to the video aspect of things, USM's pretty hands-on. Like, you know, they don't force you to put a camera in your hand, but you get more than enough opportunities to get a camera in your hand and learn what it's like to be on set and what they do on set, the intensity of it, the constant action, the persistence that it takes to be successful. I don't know, I feel like they've given me a skill set that is broader than I anticipated. I thought I would come in here, they'd show me the intricacies of a camera and then show me how to work Adobe, maybe After Effects and some Photoshop, and I'd go about my way. And it was so much broader than that, because I know like live TV sets, I know like I've taken lighting classes, marketing classes, business classes. They've exceeded my expectations in the sense that I expected to get something so small in general, and they blew it up to a point where now I feel like I could sit with someone who works in this field and hold a conversation, whereas before I would just be taking notes the entire time.
All right, so now that you guys have a general idea of how we felt going into this project and some of the resources and such that we were going to be using, we started to reflect a little bit and realize that the project is a little bigger than just the two of us. So we decided to start asking some of our fellow peer students what, we started asking them how COVID has specifically affected them and their ability to learn and do projects within this program. So now we are going to hear a little bit of what they have to say.
Hey, my name is Dylan Ragland. I'm a student here at USM under the MEA Sound and Recording Arts program, and I basically run the recording studio.
Real quick question, man.
Yeah.
How would you say that COVID has affected your ability to learn within this program, and just how has it affected your classes overall?
Well, I definitely learn from other people, being around other people and other people's experiences. And since the classrooms have been kind of reduced because of COVID, social distancing and everything, which is a good thing, I find it a little bit difficult to kind of get that shared experience kind of thing. So it's like, I only get my experience and maybe a couple of others, and that's what I get to learn from. So I find that a little bit difficult, but.
Yeah, and personally speaking, like there's been a lot less group like projects related
Right.
because of past few semesters we actually had a lot of group related like jazz recordings, orchestral recordings. We haven't done any of that.
I miss the jazz recordings.
Yeah, same here, man. Well, how does that make you feel though, like overall? Because I mean, that's a huge part of our education.
Oh, I think that it's training us to be a little bit more independent for ourselves, I suppose, as creators and as engineers, for example. Like we're training to be a little bit more independent, where we can handle the things ourselves. We can go set the mics. We don't need 18 people in a studio to set up microphones. You know, we can do it ourselves. So I think it's a double-edged sword, definitely.
Hi, my name is Mary Preston Evers. I am a senior at University of Southern Mississippi. I am a media entertainment student with emphasis in video arts, and I work in the EQR upstairs on the 3rd floor in College Hall.
So how has COVID affected your ability to learn while you have been here at USM?
It's definitely made it tougher. I'm a very hands-on learner, and I haven't had as much hands-on experience as I would usually need because we don't have classes, in-person classes. And also, I miss having the encouragement from other students, and that, you know, when students are in class together, we push each other, and I really miss that because we all want to do well, and when we're together, it's easier. We have someone to motivate you, and I definitely miss that.
Yeah, it's been a while since there's honestly some people I haven't even seen this semester.
I know,
that I know I'm still going to class with technically, but I never get to see them.
I miss seeing them, like having that conversation is nice. And it's like, we usually talk about media productions things and those type of conversations. And I miss that, so.
With all that in mind, how does that make you feel in relation to, because this is your 4th year at USM, so this is the first time that you've had to make such a drastic change due to something that you can't control. So, how do you feel about that?
It definitely makes me upset. With it being my last year too, I feel like I'm missing out on certain opportunities that could have been there, would have been there if it wasn't for COVID. Yeah. But I definitely feel like I'm missing out. It does upset me, but I mean, there's really nothing you can do about it. So it is what it is, and have to live and learn and do what you can. So.
All right, well, that's all we had for you. I appreciate your time.
Of course.
Okay, so that was our student interviews. But shortly after doing that, even that didn't feel like enough. We're only here for 4 years, if not, maybe a little bit more than that. We need the insight of some faculty that's been here for far longer, knows the inner workings of the system that makes this college go better. We need more wisdom in this project. So after some very delicate emailing and some even more delicate scheduling and all the fallbacks that came with it, we got some professors to accept interviews, and we got their insight. That's what you'll be seeing next.
I may have white hair, but I'm smoking.
That's perfect. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Paul. Dr. Linden, I should say. We have to be more formal here. You know, people got to know who you are.
I don't insist on the doctor thing, but Professor Linden's fine.
How long have you been teaching, and have you ever had to deal with anything like this before in regards to COVID?
That's a good question. Well, I mean, the uniqueness of the situation is beyond the COVID measure, which, as you know, I think most people are aware, this is a once per century type of event, at least for our country, meaning that the last pandemic was around 100 years ago, of course. And so, no, I haven't had to deal with that. I've been teaching in one capacity or another in higher education since the early 90s. So I was admitted to graduate school with the stipulation that I also teach. But I was teaching in foreign language at that time. And then I taught in the School of, then I was hired about, I finished my dissertation and taught some through there, and mostly literature and language, and then, but I guess the point that I want to make, so then I was hired by the School of Music in 2007, and then that was when the EI program sort of was imported into the university here, and then we were moved to communication, and so I've been teaching in one facet or another, through those different contexts. Geez, what is that, 30 years almost, 25 years?
What changes have you specifically had to make to your courses in response to COVID?
Right, well, let me, I guess, speak to the redesign of the curriculum first, because this is a situation where even though I've been in different disciplines, from languages, literatures, philosophy, entertainment on the music side, it's always been a discipline. And so now, being that we are in a entertainment media program, it's not enough to stay in your lane, we're finding, because the jobs, so we structure our curriculum based on our research. So we'll go look at job advertisements of what can we expect students to actually get. And we start to see the language shifting about skill sets and what they're expected to do. And so we're seeing many more hats required, or not required, but employers smile on the ability for students to have a wider frame of reference. And so that would move you guys as potential employees up the line. And so the redesign of the curriculum did exactly that. It brought video out of its lane. It brought entertainment management out of its lane, audio production, and basically put them together so that you guys would have the opportunity to cross paths. And so, and see each other and have that broader frame of reference and see these different workflows converging and things like that. What it does for me is it makes me very humble, because I see that my depth of specialty, even though I'm a generalist, right, meaning I have a wide breadth of specialty, I'm like any other teacher, academic, I have a depth in usually one area. And so this has forced a new relationship to the teaching process for me. Now, when you bring COVID into the situation, and I know that's really what your question is, but I wanted you to see the big context, the background of it.
Yes, sir.
When you bring COVID into the situation, now you're disrupting a curriculum that does not yet have one full cycle under its belt. So the curriculum debuted in fall of 2019, and spring of 2020 would have been the first full cycle, meaning that you've got a group of students going through 490 and 491 in the intended sort of balance of independent, face-to-face, et cetera, and that was blown up. So when COVID hit, was the first chance that I had the 491 students that were available to directly address the 490 students face-to-face, so that the 490 students could not choose to opt out of watching a video because it's too long, inconvenient, or whatever. And so those messages about you better, the stuff you guys are seeing now about all the revisions and how to treat time and managing these different resources you have, you're seeing that in a very truthful way because you're living that now. Trying to get that information to students who think they know what's going on, even though it's just one semester back, and to make that land in a meaningful way, that's a real challenge.
Okay. Well, for this one, how do you feel your classes are holding up? Like, because we were kind of just talking about that, but specifically, how do you feel like the students are able to? Because
that's a good
for reference,
question.
491, this is intended to be kind of hands off from your perspective, but it's not for 490. But now they're forced into that situation. So, like, how do you feel like they're personally dealing with this?
Okay, so let me address this from a couple of different levels of distance. So first of all, in terms of student health, I've been able to see, and I'm talking about a sense of being well, doing a good job as a student, not just like physical health. So student health and happiness. After the virus hit, everybody sort of kind of focused in and made it through the spring. And so it wasn't until the fall, so last fall, that I saw the real hit. That was the first full semester of we're starting disrupted and we're going all the way through the process disrupted. And there's no true sense of the end of the tunnel. There's no light shining through yet. And so it was about a third, half to in the meat of last semester, that's when I saw students really sort of grappling with that and finding it difficult to respond from their own unique position of like, I have my life, I have my school, they've worked fine up until this point, but really having issues of meeting both of those needs and going into deep depression, not showing, not being responsive in communication, not even being as available to their friends. If I were to ask, one set of friends about, well, where's this person? And so that I felt like was sort of the bottom of the pit there. This semester, I have seen the sort of what I would call a spirit of resilience. Students have been in it for long enough, and this is generally speaking, right? Every student is different, I realize that. Students have been in it long enough to be like, I can either cope with this or I can't cope with this. And they buckled, the ones who could cope, buckled down and have fought and found a way through, given the very narrow pathway that I'm compelled to offer them as the professor. It's like, I'm trying to be very clear with what I need, give them opportunities. And so the students that have, had the drive and the wherewithal, right? The depth of resilience to respond have done so. And then there are others in a small group that I have been, back with USM long enough to see that there's always going to be a percentage of the student body in any given class that is either going to procrastinate to the last minute, is non-communicative, doesn't have good study habits, and finds themselves playing catch-up no matter what. And so they're still there. It's just that the hill is a little higher, right?
Yeah. This has been incredible, like a well-needed lesson in life.
Cool.
If you had a single month to prepare for the outbreak before it hit USM, what would you have done differently?
Oh my gosh, that's funny, and I'm gonna do something unusual and say, let it happen the way it went down.
Oh, okay.
That's because of the fact that so many of the life lessons that we have to see where the rubber meets the road and to figure out how to best educate ourselves moving forward for life. One of those best lessons is that stuff will happen in an unannounced fashion, and how do you react, right? So the ability to observe that on the fly and to all of us go through that together, that's the kind of thing that really bonds communities together. And I think that it would have felt disingenuous or not real for me to know that it was going to happen, and then not, I don't know, like I wouldn't have felt that I was being faithful to my vocation as a teacher, you know, to kind of structure that but not show my hand to you guys, I guess. I guess I could have said, okay, this is coming, but then, you know, I think that the real lesson there was a very valuable one because it's so rare. But for it to hit all of us equally, and then for all of us to have to regroup, find a way around, I mean, that is so true, in my opinion, to the way that life will hit you with curveballs, and what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do now, right?
Thank you for joining us, Jared. And before we begin, I'd just like to ask you, what is it that you do here at USM, and how long have you been teaching?
So I've been here for about 7 years now, give or take. And I'm one of the instructors in the Media and Entertainment Arts program, and I teach specifically in the video arts.
Have you ever had to deal with anything like this before? Like, have you ever had to completely dismantle your class and like just kind of eyeball it over like what you had about, I think, 2 weeks to completely restructure everything last semester? So like anything like that ever happened before?
Never. There's been nothing like this happen in my life. I mean, since I've been teaching, I've never experienced anything like this, but either just in my lifetime in general, the pandemic. But I mean, it was really tough. It sucked, just to be frank, you know. It was just terrible trying to just like cram and run everything online and just get that done. But I mean, at the same time, I think it really helped me evaluate my teaching because I was doing a lot of recordings, and it forced me to, you know, self-evaluate about how I was delivering some of my content to my classes, and I could look at my, you know, listen to my recordings and look at myself and hear what I was saying. And so in a sense, it was sort of a silver lining, and it brought that back into perspective for me in terms of my teaching, and I was able to evaluate myself and the methods that I was using and how I was introducing content with students. So in that regard, sort of thankful in that sense, but at the same time, I mean, it's been a tough scenario, and I mean, especially with the production aspect, you know, teaching hybrid or trying to divide up classes and rotate schedules, it's been troubling and nightmarish to say the least for both myself and I'm sure the students.
I mean, it's pretty easy to go either way, but how would you say, like, comparatively, the students have dealt with it with the faculty, and compared to the faculty? Because I know, like, they both have had to completely change things, but both from a completely different perspective.
Well, that's a tough one there. I mean, I would say it's probably, I mean, thinking of it from the student perspective, I would say it was probably harder on you guys, the students, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents. I mean, it's definitely is troublesome for us in terms of how we approach and deliver the content, but you guys are the ones that are consuming it. And we're teaching you, so I mean, especially when we're talking about production, you know, production quality, or not production quality, but production aspects and physically doing production content and producing videos, you know, setting up and recording sessions, audio, you're an audio person, but I would say it's, in my opinion, it seemed more troubling for the students. I mean, it was a lot of additional work on me to figure out hybrid elements to make it work so I could give the students in the class the best possible content of what they need to remain relevant in the industry and be competitive, you know? Because I mean, that's one of my key components is like, okay, the content that I'm teaching, what's gonna make them competitive in the market and what's gonna help them out? So that's been one of my main focuses, but in that sense, I would say it was tougher on the students, man, in my opinion, than it would be the faculty. But I haven't asked a ton of faculty aside from, you know, some of my cohorts like Dr. Sheffer and John and how they've dealt with some of the things. But I mean, across the board, I would say it was probably tougher on the students, in my opinion, even though knowing that it was really difficult for me to come up with changes on how I was delivering content. But the consuming it, because some of the material is really complex and you need to be touching it, and so figuring out a creative way where we could still be somewhat hands-on but, you know, stay in the realm of the COVID restrictions that have been placed upon us. But yeah,
That's pretty enlightening. So, you being a pivotal part of what makes this whole operation run, but you also being a human being with a wife and child, How stressful has it been for you to acclimate to COVID lifestyle while still teaching within the MEA program?
Very stressful. My anxiety levels were definitely worse than they have been in quite some time. I do suffer from that. So when the pandemic hit, and having a small child too, it really worried me, because I have a 3-year-old. And then also, like, a big deal with me is I have a family history of, like, heart disease, there's cancer, a bunch of, like, pre-existing conditions that run throughout my family as far as genetics are concerned. So I started getting paranoid about, like, if I did get it, perhaps one of the underlying conditions that I've been worried about most of my life would come up and, sneak up on me. And I actually did get COVID, though. I got it after Thanksgiving. I ended up with it, and it was miserable. Definitely worse than the flu. I mean, it was for me. I've had the flu a couple of times, but I haven't experienced anything like this. I mean, I would wake up in the morning, I felt like death. Getting out, I did not want to get out of bed. And I had to, because we were locked inside, and my 3-year-old did get it, but he had a fever for like 5 days straight that we basically couldn't get rid of. And yeah, it was very stressful, sir. But I'm very thankful too as well, because at the same time as stressful it was, I know a lot of friends that do freelance work, full-time filmmakers, you name it, and have businesses, and had a really tough time going through this, as far as the workload was concerned. And I was very thankful that I had a job, I could still function and work as a whole and continue, making a living. So it had its ups and downs, but overall, yeah, it's a very stressful situation, for sure.
So if you could have given students academic advice on how to properly prepare for COVID before it struck, what would that advice be?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I guess I would say, what advice would I give them? If you don't use like iCalendar or some kind of Google Calendar, set up notifications, or have some sort of system set up where you can be very strict about how you go through your online content and hold yourself accountable, do that 100%. Be organized and have something laid out where you can dedicate time to a specific class, or if you're going to read so many times a week, or if you have certain content that you have to produce, factor in time and be very strict about your routine, about how you're going to get through the course content that's online, most certainly.
Diligence and consideration carried us through the virus. Work ethic and skills of the trade was the payoff for the years spent. USM has given us more than our fair share of knowledge and first-hand experience. But the last thing we wanted to cover as we reached the end of our project was our trip along the way and where it has brought us and our feelings about our experience.
USM has done so much more for me as a media producer than I ever could have prepared for. I'm so thankful to have been a part of its student body. As a multifaceted content creator, I feel ready. I'm well-rounded, educated, savvy to the lingo, and I'd like to think that I'm trained enough in production to not only work in my major, but branch off into multiple different outlets of media. To speak to the point of diversity, some of my favorite classes were ones that actually had nothing to do with video at all. My public speaking and marketing courses were among my top 5, which probably sounds insane when considering that I major in video arts. But I've learned so much and have gained so many connections and assets. The future is still very full for me. And even though I'm the one who put the work in and gave the time needed to succeed as a student, I still have to give credit to the university. This type of hands-on experience and immediate back and forth with people trained and experienced in your field, that's something you can't simply find in a YouTube video.
Being that I transferred here from a community college, I feel I have an interesting view of the audio side of the MEA program. I was able to almost wholeheartedly insert myself into the program since all my core classes were already handled. Every aspect of the MEA program is meant not only to hone your chosen craft, it is also there to broaden your abilities by giving you the opportunity to learn beyond your field and widen your skill set. I feel like I now have the skill set to properly tackle most tasks related to sound and recording arts, as well as properly research the topics I know I need to work on. During my time at USM, I have helped run live shows, recorded and mixed entire jazz sessions, and overall have taken some eye-opening classes from people directly in my field. One of the things I have to say I love the most, though, was the push to consistently collaborate with fellow students. Although many of those things are now rare due to restrictions brought on by COVID, watching my fellow peers persevere creatively despite the widespread and sudden changes has been inspiring to me and will be something that will motivate me for years to come.
At the time of writing this, COVID-19 has struck 131 million people worldwide. killing approximately 3 million. Those numbers alone are terrifying, let alone the fear that strikes the ones unfortunate enough to catch the virus with that in mind. That said, our new normal has become seeing our friends and neighbors with masked faces. And while that is sad, it's important to remember that those people are still smiling, still laughing, and living with this obstacle to the best of their abilities. And while neither of us really care for cliches, it's important to remember to live for today. More now than ever. We have been and still are living in a time where tomorrow isn't guaranteed for some. This virus knows no sympathy and has proved that time and time again. With that being the case, all we can do is carry on and try to make the best of things together as people. And until the vaccine has had its time to circulate and show results, that has to be enough. Working together and learning to care about lives outside of our own has to be enough. Thank you for sharing this experience with us. This seemingly long but obscenely short summary of our experience with the University of Southern Mississippi as we deemed fit to tell it. Stay safe out there.